All right, good evening. I'd like to call the Parks and Rec meeting to order for July 27th, 2021, and we will start off with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, next up is the roll.
Hale,
Present.
Cornwell,
Present.
Zibble Wolf,
Here.
Duzick,
Here.
Noyes,
Here.
Vranick,
Here.
Snyder,
Here.
And amendments to the agenda?
There are none.
None. Ceremonies, announcements, appointments, and presentations. We have a fire restriction in effect for all city parks, and that means no charcoal briquettes or open fires, no smoking unless in a vehicle or in a cleared space of over 3 feet, and you are still allowed to use propane barbecue or stove. Okay. Any declarations of conflict? I see none. Consent to calendar, and that's for the June 22nd, 2021 minutes. Need a motion to approve those?
Also move.
I'll second that.
Zibble Wolf,
Aye.
Duzick,
Aye.
Cornwell,
Aye.
Hale,
Abstain.
Snyder,
Aye.
Noyes,
Aye.
Vranick,
Aye.
All right, on to citizen issues. The commission received a couple letters, and we received those and acknowledge them. We appreciate it. Nothing else right now.
Jason, I'm sorry, are those the ones in relation to the dog park? Is that the ones you're referring to?
Yes, that one,
Okay.
and
So
then-
they were in the packet then?
Yeah,
Okay,
yep.
Thank you.
And then unfinished and old business, Singing Hills renovation dog park.
Good evening. As you just mentioned, there was some feedback given under, we have on our website a council comment area. So it was sent in there, and then we were CC'd on it from administration. So we did do the workshop. That would have been on the 19th of July. And as expected, the people that came out, probably the majority were ones that had concerns about park improvements, mostly the dog park. We've given you a list or a synopsis of what their concerns were and what things they liked, and then just general comments. Two of our commissioners were there, Angela and Christina. I don't know if there was anything else that you folks saw that we had missed in our notes.
No.
Okay. So it gives you an idea there. Obviously, there was from the neighbors to the immediate east, there was a concern about the noise from the dog park, the cleanliness, just having more people in the park, people parking on their street, a lot of things there. And these are things that we face with other parks as we put them in. They are community parks. They are not private parks. They are there for the whole community. We set these workshops. We're not required to do them, but we set them so that we can get final design and kind of tweak it and see where we can adjust it and stuff. And Robbie will cover some of that based on it. But because of some of the comments that have been received, some of the comments that were faced to us, there was a belief that this was a project that had been hidden, that it hadn't been discussed, that it was suddenly just created. And I wanted to just go over the kind of the timeline. And I think I went beyond my memory. So I got a hold of Tammy Martinez and had to ask her for some stuff. And then she reminded me of things which kind of made me feel a little old. She reminded me that the first discussion of the dog park and the dog issues, that was dogs off of leash, issues we were having within the city parks, everything, started with Jackie McAvoy. And I believe it was either, could never clarify if it was either when she was a Park and Rec commissioner or she was a council liaison, but still, that's quite a long time ago. Finally agreed that at the very least it started in 2001 when I came back to the city. It kind of bounced around for a while there. We looked at things, we talked about it, but money was tight. We had other projects to work on. The topic really rose to the surface and jumped up in probably 2007, 2008 from our records. People wanted other people to clean up after their dogs. You know, we saw conflicts on the sports fields. We also saw that finally some dog parks had been in for a little bit around the nation. We saw a lot more literature and design stuff. We saw associations being built for dog parks. We started doing research on what makes them successful, what makes them fail. So kind of went on that. That continued along. We looked at possible sites in about 2010, our first run on that. We looked at everything we had, and and when I say we, it was both staff and the commission, we didn't want to impact parks where we could. So we didn't want to give up, say, a soccer field when we didn't have enough soccer fields to do it. We didn't want to push everything into Chameleon Park because it was already being overused. We did not want to go into a site where we could damage it. That's the same reason we haven't added more disc golf, because it has an impact on the site. It has a cost to our usage. So those things were put in. With that push, the decision was not to disrupt other activities, to try and look for new land, and specifically we wanted to look at some of the commercial areas, realizing that anytime we went into a neighborhood, just like we put in a ball field or anything else, we're going to have some neighbors that will be disrupted and not happy with it. We spent the next several years, and we were also had decided that we needed for raw land, about 3 acres, based on the side guidelines from the best practice in dog parks, need for parking, site improvements, separation of animals so you can take care of areas and let them regenerate and stuff. That's for a natural setting. If you go to everything being hardened, whether that's the crushed granite or the synthetic turf, you can go smaller, but it's much more expensive and it has a shorter lifespan. So we checked a lot of commercial. We looked at the Karen Streeter Greenway in that. We actually did look at a property that was for sale within that, and the owners, as soon as we showed any interest, tripled the price. We couldn't afford it. We looked at a few other commercial sites, but they were picked up by other commercial. Blue Dog picked up a lot of those spaces. We just found we couldn't afford the commercial site. In 2012, with our comprehensive plan, at that point, dog parks were a high item. We did include a summary of 2012 and our most recent 2020 showing all the different references to dog parks, everything that was discussed in it, the requests. So from there, we still were looking at the commercial, and we looked at the ITD property that was next to or behind Yokes. In 2016, we started making a push for that. ITD indicated that if we could access it, not off of Celtice, but off of Yokes and get an easement from them, that they would consider it. We entered into a contract with Vertus at that point, and the park was designed, which you've all seen. We then attempted to work with the property owner and the Yokes Corporation to work that out. That took about a year, going back and forth and working and working. In the end, the owner of the property just decided he didn't want to have an easement into that. So we took another breath, looked around for more property, saw the prices going up. Minding you, we were collecting at what, 25,000, Brian, at the time for parkland, and we weren't close on that. When Robbie came on board, we worked on some new designs, some ways to do it, and we approached ITD again, finally through conversations just before COVID hit, and then during the start of COVID, we had some good conversations with them, and they were, at the local level, open to working with it. They were also checking with the Federal Highway Administration to pull a section out where the parking lot would be, and that seemed to all work. But as it went up the food chain, it died on the vine again. It just wasn't there. So that was last fall. We brought it back to you saying we've been, hitting this wall again and again. The demand is still there for dog parks. You folks saw what came out in the master plan and the request. It surfaced to that top 3 level. And we talked about bringing it back at the start of 21. In February of 21, we brought forward the slideshow. We went over, here's where our top 3 are based upon past items that we looked at. Yokes was still in that, but it included the Cecil property and Singing Hills. Both of those were based on either under usage or being open property. They were also looking at the number of houses that interfaced with it. They were a lower number. So in March, we kind of tweaked on the designs Robbie worked on. In May of this year, you folks selected one. We were at about 90%. And we added in through this process, it wasn't just a dog park, but we looked at the parking issues in the street. We looked at playground renovation. We looked at ADA access. So the idea was to make it more than just a chain link space. If we're going to put something in, we need to put in a quality product that's going to last, but also meets the needs of the user. At the beginning of July, we did go to council for a contract on engineering to start that street work, and then all the ADA stuff that was approved, but we have put that on hold based upon some of the feedback and stuff. I already talked about the July 19th workshop. And I guess that's where we've gone. So we've gone for a long time. For staff, we keep going back to it. It's gone on for a long time. So sometimes in our mind, a lot of information has gone out to the public. Could we have done a better job? Always. Without a doubt. There's never a time in any business that you can't do a better job of communicating and getting the word out. On the same note, with this, we didn't have to do a public hearing, and we didn't, but we didn't have to do the on-site workshops either. We do that because we feel that in the end, we get a better product from what we're bringing to our community. We haven't done a community citizen survey in a long time, but the last one we had, our park usage was in the 90% range. That's extremely high. And I think it's because we take that extra step to find out what the public wants, but also how to work with the neighbors. They're our best eyes in there. I think I actually covered a lot of the spots that under locations where we wanted it visible. So we don't want to tuck it into a dark corner. We have to have the parking. We want to try and utilize underused spaces or areas ready for renovation. So went through all that. So I'm going to let Robbie talk a little bit about what we found out from the feedback that we've received. And not everybody was against it, just so you know. We did have some that were positive. One at the very end that came late was real excited because it met all the needs of her family. But once again, you're going to have it both ways.
All right. Good evening, members of the Park and Rec Commission. Robbie Quinn, Parks Planner. And as Dave mentioned, we had our open house at Singing Hills, and I'll just do a little bit of background just to re-familiarize yourselves. So Singing Hills Park, about 7.5 acres. It's kind of in an odd shape. So there are these open spaces that are fairly linear right here and then to the south. And then we obviously have the large open field space, which is what we are focusing on for our park renovations. So at the last Park and Rec Commission, we brought forward a couple options, and this was the one that was chosen to move forward with. And it had basically 2 dog park areas, a large dog about an acre and a small dog about a half acre. We talked about the playground improvements, additional parking with the street improvements, removing the kind of half cul-de-sac here, adding additional ADA parking, adding some shelters, the hardened dog park entrance, and then creating a separate kind of parking area and entrance from the dog park as opposed to the playground area. And so at our community meeting, there were all the comments that kind of we summarized were in the packet, some of which we can't really address with design. You know, if they don't want a dog park, we can't design a dog park and meet their needs. So what I'm going to kind of go over is some of the things that we can actually address with this other option. So a majority of some of the comments were basically a loss of their open space, their field, where they could throw a ball, throw a frisbee. And so with this concept, we are removing one of the dog park areas essentially and just having one 1-acre dog park site. And so the fence line is now kind of in this area. And so, as I mentioned, this will remain the dog park 1-acre site, but now we're kind of leaving about a half acre of just open park space over here. There was a comment about a bigger playground, so in doing this, we were able to kind of reconfigure the playground shape, increase the size a little bit. Comments on a shelter that wasn't just in the dog park area, so we added a larger shelter and are still keeping the smaller shelter that currently exists. More green space around the playground, again, already kind of addressed. One of the neighbors, specifically right here, was concerned about the proximity of the dog park to his property, so we kind of created this little jut in the fence and are adding a little buffer area. So this will be bermed with some evergreen trees. He was also concerned about leaves blowing into his yard, so some evergreens there, and hopefully that'll kind of create some separation. And just a couple side notes, there were comments on the splash pad, pickleball, basketball. Obviously those are additional costs as well, but there were more comments on just open space, and so those things would take up quite a bit of space, as well as increased traffic, which was another comment that was mentioned, etc. So this is kind of just a rough idea of what it could potentially become if we move forward with this site, in addressing some of the comments that we heard that we can actually address in design.
The only thing I would add on that, could you go back to the last slide, Robbie? I know that the one neighbor who does not want the park near them, and they would like to see the dog park, if it's there at all, pushed all the way to the
Yeah.
west, but that would impact
So
the
basically,
playground.
they wanted the dog park to be on this side and then the open space to be on this side to create more of a buffer from their property. But functionally, from a park user perspective, it doesn't make as much sense as putting it close to the playground and the shelter and having all that kind of open space in one side versus 2 sides. So that's kind of why we did it this way, and again, tried to appease them a little bit with this small buffer here.
Our spacing was at 30 or 35 feet on the original from the fence line.
About 30.
Yeah, that's about double what we've done for Chase Park when we did the fields. It's because we already knew just how things have changed. So now you're looking at one that's even further in there. So these are things to consider. And I guess that's where we're at right now is we have a few people that are against it. We've been told there's a petition going around against the dog park. There may be a petition going around for the dog park. We know that there are neighbors there that are for and against. That's where it's at. But enough comments have gone to some council members. I don't know if every council member has received calls and comments, but I know some have. And it's been directed that you folks make a recommendation, and then that recommendation will go back to the city council for their acceptance of that recommendation or denial of it. But at this point, you have a few choices. You could accept the park as it was first presented in May with the larger footprint. You can accept it with a few changes based on the resident feedback. And it could be this design, it could be this, something similar, put a reduction in there. You can decide not to build a dog park at Singing Hills. That also includes all the other improvements because they are tied together. You can direct us to look at just another city park for other options. I know in the packet there you received a comment to look at Warren Playfield, I believe. I'll go over some of those costs in a minute, but that would be losing amenities that are used for flag football at this point and overflow soccer. We don't have an excess of ball fields. That would go for the same with looking at Singing Hill Park. Down the road, you probably could do that. You can decide to delay and continue to save up monies until we're able to construct 2 fields or 2 dog parks at once. By doing that, you will see construction costs and possibly land costs go up unless we're using existing parkland. You could decide not to build a dog park at all. I can tell you that every park we put in will have some people for it and some people against it. You can decide that we'll continue to look for commercial land on a dog park. And that would require additional funding, probably that we don't have in impact fees. So I'd go to a request to council. Also, just to let you be aware that we do have a contract with JUB for the engineering design work on this roadway and whatever. If we walk away from it, we believe we can probably go back to them and negotiate some of that work to go into another park. Let's say Cecil and the Cecil property, because we know at some point we're going to have to do road improvements. There's probably a few other spots there, so we'll just have to address that. But as you can see, there's a lot of options from continuing the course to stopping the course to looking in other directions. So with that, I'll shut up and let you guys kind of discuss and ask staff any questions you have. And then, of course, we had 2 commissioners there at the meeting, so they probably have some input on what they saw, what they heard.
On this second option, would you guys foresee any or much more conflict? Because before we had set aside large and small dog areas with having one area.
You're going to have
Potentially.
minimal.
Minimal.
There are some people with the smaller dogs that aren't going to like being with the bigger, but there's other ones, and we called it a big dog, little dog, but really it was a little dog and all other dogs, because some little dogs want to run with the big dogs. That's just how it is.
Yeah, and then obviously there are other dog parks in the area. If they are that uncomfortable with it, then they still have
How
those.
about affect usage with cutting down the size?
It may or may not. We don't really know. What we do know is we won't have a place that if it starts to get overused or wear out or we have to work on it, it creates that bit of a challenge. We may have to close it down, but then again, that may be a few years down the road, and by that time, we hope that we'll have another, just like we did with the splash pads. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that just the hardened entrance will just be even that much more important if we do a one side.
So if you went with the current one, if something needed to be improved or maintained on the one side, you still have the other side.
Right. One of the things you said keyed with me. I forgot to, mentioned that we had Robbie run out some costs on some things. Because we bumped this up, we saw some more costs going in. The road improvement on this was 150. So we figure it's about 730,000 to do this project for Singing Hills.
The original design,
Yeah.
not this.
It's original. If we go to the Cecil property, and we tried to keep everything the same, so kind of here's the same kind of dog park, here's the playground. That one was going to just over $1 million. Now, the one unknown there, we put in 50,000 for demolishing the house, but remediation, that may go a little bit higher. We don't know. We did look at Warren Playfield because that was suggested to you folks. And that one's going to be just shy of $1 million. And it has a lot of road frontage. And then we lose use of sports field. Now, we could cut that off and try and make it half and half. But once again, it's not going to change those costs at all.
I have a few questions. So, Robbie, if we were to if we go with this design, the open space now showing, how much space is that? Can you kind of put that into perspective for us?
It's a half acre.
So somebody could easily practice soccer there. They could continue to use that as in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How many?
And the other thing to mention is Hildy Kellogg is, right down the street as well. If they really wanted to have a full soccer field.
Okay. Okay. Would you mind going back to the first slide, the first design with both? There you go. So basically with the second slide, you were just ultimately just taking out that half-acre park. Okay, how many
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah, how many parking spaces are you adding to this? About how many total are there? What's the difference there?
I don't know the total, but I believe we were adding probably around 8 to
That's what my
10.
notes had was 8.
8, so you're adding 8. So there's actually quite a bit of
There's
parking
a
there,
lot
it looks
of parking,
like.
yeah.
Yeah. Could you also tell me what are the main streets that would feed into this park? One of the easiest ways to get there?
So Idaho would be the easiest, and then that is directly, so this is Idaho,
Okay,
and then this is Teton, which directly feeds into the park.
okay,
16th is,
Is right there.
Can't see it on here.
okay. So and 16th is an arterial as well, is that right?
Teton turns into, as it goes through the parking lot, into Yellowstone, I think is that name.
Yes, so Yellowstone is on the bottom here. So as it comes
Okay.
through the parking lot, it changes names.
Okay. Dave, you mentioned that there was some street work that was going to improve access. Where is that at? What was going to be improved?
It's improving the parking access. So
Okay,
the thing that and I watched it once the week before, and then just while we were waiting to set up, cars coming through fairly fast through that parking area, and because it's so wide, I watch them going, not slowing down, but going at a pretty good clip, and there's a van parked right there, and I mean, they came fairly close to the van.
okay,
With this, we're doing a bump out, which will calm it a little bit, and we're tightening it, which the fire department and engineering both approved, so
okay.
that was the improvement.
All right. All right. One of the big questions that I saw regularly through the comments we got was about the cleanliness of a dog park and the smell. Can you address that? How does the city address that? I know everybody's supposed to pick up after their pet, but that doesn't always happen. So how do we as a city address a dog park and the cleanliness?
We do have staff that would go through, but that's once a day. We have our in-ground garbage cans. we wouldn't use one of the big ones, but we'd use one of the small ones like we have at Falls Park. There's actually a dog rest stop at Falls Park, and we've had it in there, and it's a smaller one. Those ones seal up so that you take the bag, you dump it in there, so that contains the smell on that side of it. We are relying upon people to go in and clean up. Historically, our feedback has been is that you have people that pick up. We already have people that use the park for their dogs and don't pick up. We're not going to change that behavior, but you try and corral it.
But
We
you do
would-
have staff assigned
We would
to
have
visit
staff,
the
but
park
the other thing
on a
that I
regular
thought about
basis.
on that is I'd like to enter into a contract. We see the companies that come in and clean up yards. Why can't we contract out with one of them to come in daily and augment it?
Okay, but that would be an extra expense for
It
the
would be
city.
an extra expense.
Yeah, okay.
But I also
But-
know, as an owner of dogs, I don't know how many times we clean up a couple times a day or more, how many times you can go by and think you got everything, and then as you walk back, because you put the tools away, you see more. So it's more eyes.
Okay, so the other part of that too is not only the cleaning, but the diseases. There was some mention about the kind of diseases that dogs get. Is there anything that we do to try to curtail that, other than just good fresh air and,
It's good fresh air, you
Okay.
clean, you irrigate.
so when you
As
say you
far as-
irrigate, it like a sprinkler system?
Yeah.
So that, okay,
The other thing is, most of the people that use the dog parks, their dogs are vaccinated. Just like if you go to a kennel, you have to have all the vaccinations. Does that mean that everybody will do it? No, that was one of the questions is, would we control where the dogs came from? Would we check all their stuff? That's above and beyond that.
Okay.
Do we check everybody coming into a park, see their vaccinations? No. At a certain point, we have to trust people to do the right thing.
okay.
But an easy solution, because I know Brian's just cringing right now when I talk about staff cleaning, we can't assign, just like we can't on the splash pad or anything else.
They're going to assign you, Dave.
Our job.
And then one more question that seemed to be a regular comment was, what about noise or noise ordinances? I believe the city has a barking dog noise ordinance, or just a noise ordinance.
There's a noise ordinance.
And
Does
includes,
the PD get calls on neighborhood dogs?
yeah,
Yes, they do, and usually it's from the same people, and it's a conflict between neighbors. Will you get this here? Possibly.
well, in the, I don't see it now, but the buffer, the trees act as a buffer to that noise
when they
too,
grow
as
up,
well.
yes.
Is that right? Yes.
But the issue on the noise, we also heard from them asking for basketball courts. Those are some of the noisiest. You had a
Yes.
splash pad, you have that. So
Yeah, okay.
even pickleball, I mean, we get complaints on our concerts at Tillmore.
Sure. But in this particular case, the trees and such are there for planning, you're planting those for a reason. Not only help with the beautification of the park, but the noise, it'll
Yeah.
help with the noise as well.
Yeah, I mean,
That's correct.
It's fairly minor, honestly, as a buffer. A wall would be the most noise reduction,
Sure.
but we don't put walls in on our parks. And again, it would, they're not going to do much when they're brand new. They're going to have to mature. So that's what it's there for, but it'll take a little while.
Yeah. Will there be barking dogs? Yes, I've gone to a lot of dog parks, looking around, seeing what they do and everything else. And actually, more noise comes from the owners calling their dogs.
I expect you might be right.
And I won't bring my dogs to the park because 2 of them love to sing.
So is JUB actually working on the design at this point? Have they started that yet? Okay.
We put them
No,
on
they
hold.
hadn't, they began doing some research on easements, utilities and boundary, but fairly minor at this point. They hadn't even started the survey yet, so we had them hold off on that.
Okay. I like the idea of the 2 parks of the original design, even though I know there's been some residents that have expressed, not only Post Falls residents that have expressed that they do not like even having a dog park. I think right now is the time we finally come up with something. And I was on the commission initially when we were looking at that ITD property too. And it's been on our list for a long, long time. And I'd like to see it done right so that all of a sudden we're not growing out of our dog park within just a short time. I like the idea of the small dog park. I think that that will help with just overall, it gives us more space. So I really like the first design as well. Sorry, I hogged a whole bunch of time.
It's okay. So I got a couple questions too. So irrigation, is irrigation going in either way if we go with artificial?
So the artificial is fairly minor. That's only at the entrance.
Okay.
And in this case, we would still irrigate that
Yeah.
on a separate zone, just, cleanliness, we can rinse it and that sort of thing. But the whole park is definitely not synthetic, and there is going to be irrigation revisions regardless if we move forward, just because we're making a lot of adjustments to the park.
Okay.
It's already irrigated, but it needs to be upgraded.
Gotcha. Were the residents that were unhappy with the proposed idea, were they offered this idea? And were they happy with that?
No.
No, they were not. Okay.
So
We didn't offer it. This has come out of
This
their-
is just from their feedback.
From their
That's
feedback.
where this design came from, and obviously, none of them are here, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
I might add that you have done a great job addressing a lot of the things that came up as we were out there visiting. Taking that a little additional space between the homes on the right there, expanding that to the open space. I worry a little bit because it's a 6-foot chain link fence that's going to encompass that dog area space. I just wonder, it's great to have the park on that one side, but I wonder if they really realize that, it's going to be gated off. It's not going to be open like it was. But I just really commend you for, you really listened to what they were saying in regards to how you've spaced this.
And then one last thing for me, can you show I don't know if you have a map or anything up, the other parks that are close to this?
Yeah, I don't have that. So this is the closest. Hildy is right
Right
here,
there.
this parcel. And again, it's within a trail. Granted, there's no crossing right there, but there is here. And that's the closest other park.
And then Syringa would be to the north,
The north,
about,
yeah.
half a mile, quarter mile?
Probably half.
Half a mile.
And the Cecil property is to the east, half mile, 3/4 mile.
Okay.
Yeah. So, right, White Pine is up on 21st and down on Spokane, so you kind of have a chain in there of stuff.
I have a question. What type of rules are typically posted, or do you intend on posting? I mean, to address, recommending that the dogs be vaccinated before coming, or, some of those
Yeah.
issues that
There's a
were
lot of
discussed.
rules that they post. We'd probably, before we finalize it, we would go and look and see what is over at the Coeur d'Alene dog parks and also right across the border, and try and find those common areas there so that people get used to the same thing. But it comes down to your hours of operations, probably sunrise, sunset, because that's defendable. We would look at that all dogs should be vaccinated. We would look at, aggressive dogs need to be removed, that there will be the timeout spaces in case a couple dogs need to have timeouts, our owners. We talk about cleaning up after yourself. If you see a problem, let us know. If you, what else has been on those lists? Have them on lead between there and the car. I mean, so some pretty basic things, respect each other, but the most part is they need to be vaccinated. We could add I don't know how you put controlled barking, but if your dog is excessively loud, be respectful of the neighbors, or I don't know.
Well, one thing to keep in mind too, that if somebody lives in Post Falls, they're supposed to have their dog licensed. And in order to get that license, you're required to have a rabies vaccine.
They're supposed to, yes.
Yeah, yeah. So technically, if it's people coming from inside Post Falls, they should have all of that, but.
You're required over in
Coeur d'Alene,
Coeur d'Alene, you're required over in Spokane County. Matter of fact, they're stricter than us.
right.
So
So,
still, there's a percentage that don't.
Sure.
I know the question was, would the animal control be there enforcing everything, and no, they will not. They have enough things to deal with. Just like we can't put a person at the skate park 24/7 or Corbin Park or anywhere else. We do the best we can.
Would they be able to do a spot check, just intermittently, every once in a while?
We'll ask them, but once again, it's based on their calls, and I can't speak for another department. You know, we already go check all our parks on a daily basis. So there's people out there collecting trash and everything else, so.
Well, Danny has thrown her opinion out. I'll throw out mine. I'm good with either our original design or understanding that we listened to some of the comments from neighbors, although this is a city park. We trying to be friendly, either of those, but I think we need to move forward with a park.
right. But quick question, that 6-foot chain link fence is either way, is that right? Either design includes that.
Might put it any cheaper. And it's a vinyl chain link fence, so it's not just, it blends in a little bit better.
Okay.
It'll be either the dark green or the the black.
So I think my vote is for the second one. I think it sends a really strong message that you came out, you told us what you thought, and we've made adjustments, and we've listened. And yes, we're still moving forward to your point about it being a city park, but I think it sends a really strong message that we heard you, we've applied some of your thoughts, and here's what we have.
I like this one. I think it addresses the neighbors' concerns. I think that, I like that there's just one big area. I don't have a dog, so it's really hard for me to understand a dog park very well. But I like that there's more space for the kids to play, the kids who are actually using the park currently.
I agree. I think we should move forward with the dog park. I like both options. I do like the first option a little bit better, just having the big dogs separated from the smaller dogs. But I do like this concept, taking into account the neighbors' comments.
Are you able to take you moved the fence just a bit on the, I don't know what side, is that the east side? To give that just a little bit more of a buffer. Are you able to do that on the first design? Or is it pretty much like that?
So,
Oh,
this over here?
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, this is just a design, so nothing.
Yeah.
The one thing about going to a single versus double, with the double, we had just more shelters, hardscape, everything, so what your trade-off is by going to a single is you get a little bit bigger playground that we can put some money into and another shelter. But it's a toss-up,
Which one do you get the other shelter? This one or the other one?
the other
next-
one.
So the dog parks, we have a shelter in each large and small dog. There's smaller shelters, and there is also an entry shelter. So in the other concept, basically, we're just doing one small shelter still in the dog park area, but then we're getting a larger kind of, community shelter, similar to some of our other parks by the playground. So cost-wise, you're probably about the same. There would be probably some slight reduction in cost with this option, just because there's less concrete, less trails, less synthetic. that sort of thing.
How bad do we need another shelter?
I'll let our
that a
expert
long
on
story?
shelters answer that
Is
one.
that a long story?
Yeah, no, they're in heavy demand.
So how big is that shelter?
Oh,
Out.
gosh. I think this one was about the size of what we put in at Meadows. So we get 8 or 6 picnic tables? 6 picnic tables.
So it'll handle about 35 people. Pardon? Oh, I thought you were telling me that many people.
I really like the secondary one. Like I said, I feel like you really listened. I think it speaks to the public that you care about not only giving those residents, the dog park, but that they still have accentuated place to play, et cetera. So I prefer this one.
All right. I like the first one the most. I think that if we're going to do a dog park, I think the first design was pretty awesome for a dog park. I understand where the neighborhood's coming from, with having a close place for your kids to play with an open field and stuff, but there's so many parks that are around them. I don't know. I like the first one more, but I understand this one. So with that, I think the majority of the commission prefers this one over the first one. So
I would say at this point, just either a
Yeah,
motion either way and
I'm not
just,
sure.
Yeah, I'll make a motion to move forward with the revision to the Singing Hills Dog Park as presented.
I'll second it.
Noyes,
Aye.
Brannick,
Aye.
Hale,
Aye.
Cornwell,
aye.
Zibble Wolf,
Aye.
Duzick,
Aye.
Snyder.
Aye.
okay. This will be brought to city council and we'll see where it goes from there. To answer your question, I think that a dual place is good. Maybe, and we'll look for a better location as we move on. This won't be our only dog park. We know we need more, just like we saw the splash pads, we'll spread it out. Just for your information, besides the Cecil property, other areas we're looking at is one, the Montrose property next to Westwood Elementary. The reason that one hasn't come forward at all is we don't have roads in yet. And until we get the roads and the parking that the developer will put in, it's kind of pointless. There's still a couple more spots that we're working on. But hopefully we can spread some of those out. So, thank you.
On to new business, Cleveland Park parking.
And you said you guys were getting bored. The topic of parking fees at Camelin Park was a council topic. Staff was asked to bring it back. From there, it was the council's directive to send it back to you folks for consideration and a recommendation. At the July 6th council meeting, the council had a lot of discussion on it. There was a lot of different viewpoints on it. There were some common viewpoints within that, but there was enough, just slight differences of opinion on that it was sent to you folks. And they're looking for you folks to address the parking issue. There's a lot of things in it. We did set it up as an action item, so if you guys have a clear mind on what you'd like to see, that motion could be made. You can also take time to look at it. We could set up a workshop that would come back, say, probably in the first couple weeks of August, and then that way it would be ready for your September. I guess August is there, so we could do it that quick, or come back in even on the, somewhere in that middle of September, so that you guys then could vote on something in your September meeting. So we have a little bit of leeway in there. It's not that you got to make the decision tonight, but we wanted you guys to have a chance to think about it. Some of you are aware of some of these things, but I just wanted to go kind of over where we're at.
So we don't have an August meeting, is that
No,
correct?
that's correct.
Okay.
So currently, how we operate is we charge a daily fee at the ticket booth, and that's $5 for cars, $8 for boats, and $10 for buses, and that's a parking fee. We do not charge for launching boats. So there are people that come in and launch and then leave and park elsewhere, park in the neighborhood, go park up towards Templin's, catch the boat as they come through, a lot of things that we do. We sell season car passes only, and it hasn't changed in years. It's $15 for a resident, $30 for a non-resident. And we do not sell season boat passes anymore. We did at one point both resident and non-resident. We phased out the non-resident boat passes, kept the seat. And the reality is we had so many complaints from the boat users because they would come to launch, they'd have the pass, and they couldn't find a parking spot. We just don't have that many compared to other parking spots. On my memo to you folks, there's a summary of things. There are some council members that would like to see no charge for parking for city residents. There were some that didn't indicate either way that they wanted. There seemed to be a willingness to charge a launch fee. If the parking fee, it should be broken down into resident, non-resident. I know there was discussion for in-state and out-of-state. Legal has once again said that violates Idaho code.
So charging out of state violates Idaho code?
Right. The code sets it up for that you can charge non-residents because they're not paying taxes. But for somebody who, say, lives in Coeur d'Alene, they're not paying any taxes that go to support it. So what you do is you look at resident, non-resident. The reason the state charges in-state and out-of-state is they collect at the whole state level. Most counties will collect in-county and out-of-county. Kootenai County does a little bit different. They have a boat sticker that that you can register your boat in Idaho, even if you live in Washington, if you live in Latah County, if you live in Bonner. You can choose where to register your boat. So they take anybody who registers their boat in Kootenai County as being a Kootenai County resident.
So I'm confused.
Yes.
I'm not quite sure, the in-state versus out-of-state. You said there's an Idaho state law that says you can't, but I'm not sure you explained it
Okay.
very well. Are you talking about Post Falls residents
You can
versus
charge-
Idaho residents?
Right. You can charge
Okay.
resident, non-resident.
So resident of the state of Idaho?
No, resident of the city.
Of the city of Post Falls, okay.
And a lot of people will reference that the state of Idaho Parks charges in-state and out-of-state. It's because they are the state of Idaho. That's their tax collection basis. The county's tax collection basis is the county. For us, it's the city. So that's going off of the recommendation of our council, our legal counsel. Former ones have said it also violated interstate commerce. Once again, I'm not an attorney. I'm simply repeating what they have told us and indicated. They also say there needs to be a nexus in the charge. So to say we're not going to charge a resident, but we're going to charge anybody outside of it $50, $100, that becomes excessive. And we have to be able to justify that truly is what it costs. That's the subsidy of a taxpayer. So those are the nuances of it.
So do you know what it cost us for that park and what we get out of tax revenue to maintain it?
Is that a
Oh.
really deep question?
That's a deep question.
That's what I
And
thought.
that's really, and we've had conversations, legal and myself, it becomes very complicated to do that. So it's kind of, we look at, does this seem reasonable? You know, we know that it's, the cost to figure out some of this stuff exceeds what we get, so we look at that. We also have, in this particular park, we have to play off the fact that Avista provides us some money for maintenance every year. And it's maintenance and capital. We've used it exclusively for capital, but it's there. So there's a lot of things that play a part in it. So I'm just saying that if we chose to not charge residents, but we're going to charge $100, that probably is going to have an outcry and won't hold up in that. But if it seems like a reasonable charge, you know, $10. I'm just picking numbers, so don't quote me on this, even though it's on tape now and leverage. You know, so those are some of the things there, and we'll kind of go in that in just a little bit. The, you know, charging the launch, how much should a discount be? Even how do we track resident versus non-resident? There's a few ways to do that. We could do a windshield, actually, to expect somebody down at the ticket booth to know who's a resident, non-resident, based on where they live, it's very difficult. We do it up at our office because we're hooked into the GIS system, and Haley can go through and check because boundaries change and we can go back and verify. And that's why we have just a daily rate down at the ticket booth, because you got to get people through. You can't have traffic backing up Spokane Street, up the bridge. So there's operational questions in there. You know, if we go to a windshield sticker, you know, how many is reasonable for a household to have? If you go to a card, understand that the card can be passed around, and go to non-residents. And I guess in some ways, I'm gonna back up. This makes me old, but I'm always cautious around our parking fees and how we charge for parking and how we control it, because my first month here on the job, there was the Post Falls Tribune, Coeur d'Alene Presses, I think it was a Tribune.
Tribune, it was.
They had a front page article about how we had been selling resident passes to non-resident. And that was, you know, it's not something that you walk into the job and find that that's happening, and has been happening forever. And so we tried to improve our system on that. But I'm cognizant of that. The city has been charging parking since 1981 at that park. When Avista did the improvements, one of the things they did is they brought down a ticket booth from Riverside State Park, one of their old ones, and it was put in there. It hasn't changed. We've used that money that we've generated from parking, along with picnic shelters, to improve the park. It used to be we'd get all excess, now we get 1%, or we just get a flat rate, but it's in there. So really, options for you folks to consider. I'm just going to go through a whole list, and we can come back to it, or we can.
I'm wondering, is anybody else interested in doing a workshop on this rather than
Yes.
putting all this information out here? Is that a better?
I think it would be more effective.
I think it would be too.
If I remember correctly, a few years ago, we did a subcommittee. We broke up, we had one topic, and then the other, we were talking about park fees in general, not just parking, but that's the route I would recommend. I think it gets unwieldy, with all due respect, with 7 people, we're talking about all these fees and all these different options. So I think you get 3 or 4 that are interested.
You're optimistic.
The council, I thought they wanted something in September, wanted something on an agenda in September.
We were aiming for the first council meeting of October.
Of October, okay, good.
That's really what-
Because I would think part of it might have to do with budget too.
It can,
It
it
could,
could.
yeah.
And you know, it's, that's part of it is, and that's one of the criticisms we had, is that we're only doing this for the money. We're doing it to control the usage of that park. Anybody who's been down there, it's crazy, without a doubt. And yes, there's a lot of Washington residents that use it. There's a lot of Washington businesses that use the shelters for their company picnics. Even when we didn't rent to, I guess I'm trying to think how we did it. It's been a while, but they just have one of their employees who was a resident go rent it. So it didn't make sense. So we looked at those costs, we looked at everything, but
Yeah, there's ways around that stuff. There always is.
there's always going to be.
Yeah,
And
there
that's
always gonna be,
even,
but we can always, I
Right.
think we plan for the,
and we have to find out where your comfort level is. We could just go by, you show us your driver's license, if it says Post Falls resident, then we'll accept that. And that, either you get the discount or no charge, or whatever that discount may be. That's going to include people from Hauser Lake. That's going to include people in the county who aren't resident. There's no perfect way. And I mean, I wrote up a whole page of all the questions. So I think having a committee to come back and look at it, I'm comfortable with that.
do you need a motion for that, or do we just decide that?
I think you could just decide that and see who wants to be on it, and we'll figure out a time that works. And maybe it's a one time you can do it, or it's 2 times, but we can send out those questions to consider. And
That would be my suggestion at this point. I think there's a lot of information here.
I wish it was an easy subject,
Yeah.
but it,
I mean, to your question earlier about the numbers, when we do that workshop, can numbers be brought in too, so we can see what the actual impact is?
we can get close to it.
Sure.
To have exact,
Fair.
that's why I'm not an accountant. And even our accountants don't want to do it. You can dial stuff in so tight, but we have to look at that. And then one of the tests in here is we have to make sure that it meets the requirements of our lease with Avista.
Yeah, but when we're talking about possibly removing charges, I would love to know the impact of that. What is actually made? And
Right.
so,
Exactly.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, first, a lot of it will be nothing more than a guesstimate on our part, because we don't
good with
break
a guess,
down.
yeah.
We've actually, Brian doesn't know this because he was on vacation. When he's on vacation, I actually go talk to staff, and I have them now doing counts of the number of Kootenai County plates that they see. So doing that, trying to get it. So we're trying to get a little bit better handle on it. But on the daily, we haven't kept track of that. We can tell on our passes and all that stuff. We've also done just random kind of counts on it, and the PD has too. So we have some general ideas of usage, but not all cars that we see with a Washington plate live in Washington. I mean, any of us who drive out of a neighborhood, you see a lot of cars with Washington plates coming out of it. It might be their company car or whatever else, so.
but we have an idea of how many people are showing up. I think you'd mentioned
We
that
do.
last time. And so we can get a good idea. I mean, we
We
can
can.
make a good guess.
And we can
I
also
think
look
that's
at,
fair.
can it be made up in a launch fee?
Right.
Probably if we go to a launch fee, we actually increase it from there, but those are all things that we can explore and bring back.
So you'll send us an email with some dates possibly, right?
Yeah, but I guess who wants to be on that? Because I heard you didn't want to have all 7.
That was my opinion.
I think anybody that
I mean,
wants to
I'd be
on it.
interested, but-
I would too.
I would too.
I'll just send it out to everybody.
Perfect, there you go. I think
We'll
that's a
notice
great
it as a
idea.
workshop, and then those that can make it, those that can't.
I think you'll have a good enough response. You'll get a good,
Would you
Not all of
prefer
it.
something fairly quick, or waiting till September, or maybe try and do one in the next couple weeks?
I would do that.
And
Let's not
then
wait,
that
because
way
we
if
may
we
want to
have-
have a second one.
If we have to follow up, we can.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Did you get that? Okay, so now you know it will really happen.
We'll get an email
Yeah.
from Haley.
All right, so on to administrative staff reports, Tillmore Sports Field and Park update.
Do you want to handle this one?
So just a quick update on the Tillmore Sports Complex. So at the last council meeting, we had the mass grading contract approved by council with La Riviere. And so they are planning on starting that in September, I believe, right now, with the deadline of November, basically. We don't want them to be doing work when we get into some of the colder, wetter weather. So that's kind of where we're at with that project right now. There's some activity going on with another contractor who is removing some piles for us currently, and they may be done today, but hopefully soon we'll see a lot of dirt moving out there.
Parking lot?
Oh, I didn't, okay. As part of that, there was kind of an agreement with Copper Basin when the park transition and transfer happened that they would do some of the cleanup for us on the Tillmore Sports Complex site. Since then, there's been, a lot of debris dumped and different contractors, and it was hard to kind of calculate the quantity that they're responsible for. And so they are now going to be, in lieu of that, building us a parking lot on the north side of Tillmore Park, so where next to the basketball court. There's kind of, we already have a part of the park there. That's where it was going to be eventually, but they are planning on doing that. We just got the designs back today, and they will construct that when the church goes in on that adjacent parcel.
So you mentioned dumping. Was it illegal dumping, or were they
Some of it.
construction?
Yes, so there's a lot of contractors obviously in that area, a lot of development happening, so some of the local contractors had dumped debris and materials, rock, dirt. Some of it was the city
You take
staff
out
when
for
we were building
foundations and
Tillmore
all that.
Park.
Yeah.
So,
Why did they think they could dump it there?
well, I guess I don't know exactly, but I imagine some of it was probably because at one point it was owned by Copper Basin, and maybe they weren't aware that it got transferred to the city.
And
I don't know.
a lot of it, we find open spaces, just get dumpage. And
Wow.
that's just how it works. We dumped some when we were doing Tillmore Park too. So Copper Basin did some, we did some, and we know that a lot of developer.
But they're
I
not
should say
anymore, right?
Once it's done, we're gonna have to field fence around it, and that's what we'll do, and we'll mark it,
Currently, we have the entrances barricaded.
and that's helped.
Which obviously they can still jump the curb if they really wanted to, but
They
a little
say, "Oh,
difficult going through a swale.
good." That's crazy.
Is there a timeline on the church and parking lot?
I don't know exactly on that.
It's just, right now, it's gone in for plan reviews, so
Gotcha.
probably looking at spring. But for us, it's a win-win to get that parking lot in. Now, we will have to do the landscaping of it and irrigation, but that's a small part of the cost. And they can do it at a much lower price. We've already done the engineering on it, so that saved us money there, but they're mobilizing to put in the other parking lot, so this is a small piece for them.
How big is the parking lot going to be?
26 stalls.
Oh, wow.
It's big.
Wow.
And it's taking care of some of the issues we had with ADA, and also before that whole development went in, Ross Point put in their well house, and it's really low. So that site's got to be built up around it, and they're addressing all of this. So that's a good thing for us.
On to commission comments. I have one on, I think it was the last meeting that we had, we talked about vandalism at parks. Has that been going down?
No.
That been going up?
Brian, I'll let you answer it because they're tired of listening to me. And yeah.
Good evening, Brian Myers, Parks Manager, and it's definitely something that's ever present in our park system, even currently. This past weekend, we had our first major incident related to a playground where there was malicious injury to a playground where someone installed a screw in a slide bedway. So we're seeing new types of vandalism that have occurred, and then right alongside with that, we came in on Saturday morning to find someone went through one of our park restrooms with a baseball bat and broke most of the fixtures in the restroom. So we're seeing some kind of next level of damages, and we're doing our best to try to stay ahead of that in kind of going against that broken windows theory of when things are in disrepair, they tend to fall into a state of even further disrepair, and really trying to stay ahead of that curve. We're working with our police department to try to install cameras, install temporary cameras in places, and hopefully we can turn the tide on this. But I know our student resource officer, he is really active in pursuing this. We've got 2 gentlemen that are going to be helping us out at a future event, doing some community service for pretty minor as it relates to vandalism. But they caught it early, and hopefully that'll help starve off their behavior, and they can tell their friends to knock it off and inform them of what the impact is of even something that's relatively minor. So we're doing what we can, trying to engage the community, trying to engage some of these students. We've had successes doing that in the past. The New Visions High School, their teachers do a great job of engaging those students and plugging them into the parks so that they take ownership of these spots. And they do a ton of work down at our community garden, and I know that starves off a ton of activity that way. I think some of that kind of took a step back through COVID because they had limited access to the students and had limited access out in the community. So hopefully in this next year we can begin to see those changes again and start to get some further action and ownership of our neighborhood and our community, of our park spaces. So still there.
All right.
The thing I'd like to add to that is it's willful. There's different levels of vandalism, and this is willful vandalism. It means it's premeditated. The screw into the slide was snapped off so that somebody scraped their leg. That was done to hurt somebody. That's a different level. When we see a sprinkler head getting kicked off, they don't usually go through the entire park in it, but they get a few of them. One of the things that's happening that Brian didn't mention is they're getting into the valve boxes and manually turning them off. We don't pick up that that's happened because everything's registering as good. We don't know about it until the field starts to burn out. It takes a lot of manpower and time. You can't go through and just check everything on a daily basis. We don't have that kind of manpower, and we won't. So, but it's not like that's a random act. That's a very willful thing. So we're dealing with a different, I'm going to say it's probably anger towards government, authority, whatever, but we believe that the restroom that was broken was because, and we don't know it for sure, but that afternoon, a group of teenagers were kicked out of that park. So it coincides with discipline happening and coming back. Once again, that's my opinion, but it seems to play together. So, but the PD's been really good about working with us and being very aggressive on some of this stuff.
Good.
So.
All right, anything else? Anybody? Good to go? All right, with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you.